I like to know things.
I'm Gwen Olsen, and I am a former member of the pharmaceutical industry, actually a 15-year veteran of the pharmaceutical industry. And I worked as both a specialty rep in the industry and as a hospital rep for a period of time. I also was in the field calling on general practitioners and other doctors in the first part of my career. However, I had a change of consciousness while I was in the industry and determined that I needed to leave, and I also had a moral obligation to share with other people what I had experienced, what I had participated in, and what I had seen. And the impetus for all of that primarily was that I had an adverse reaction to antidepressants in 1992 when Zoloft first came out. I was in the midst of a divorce, and my primary care physician told me that because I was losing weight and was a little despondent, that I should try a new, wonderful SSRI antidepressant that had come onto the market. And SSRIs being the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They were fairly new at that time. And there wasn't that body of information out there that you can now find on the internet and just about anywhere you look about the serious adverse reactions that people have to antidepressant drugs. So long story short, I went home and took just a couple of days worth of the Zoloft and started to have horrendous reactions. I couldn't sit still. I had racing thoughts. I felt palpitations like I was going to have a heart attack, severe anxiety, severe agitation. There was an internal tremor that was so severe that at times I would actually get into a fetal position and hold myself in order to control the shaking. So I called my family practitioner and said, hey, I'm having an akathisia reaction to Zoloft. I need to get off of this drug. And he says, well, it's not possible that you're having an akathisia reaction because that's not in the package insert. And I might back up and let you know that as a pharmaceutical rep, I had sold Haldol, a drug for schizophrenia, and was very familiar with an akathisia reaction because I had been trained about what these reactions were and how people, responded to medication when they had an akathisia reaction. And so I was really just, surprised that my physician wasn't aware that this could happen on an antidepressant drug. And even though he told me that we should double the dose, which I did comply and did initially for another couple of days, I eventually called him back and said, hey, listen, you've got to get me off of this drug. I am having an akathisia reaction. I am just coming out of my skin. This drug isn't working for me. So rather than put me through a washout period, which would have been the appropriate thing to do, getting the toxicity of the chemical that I had in me completely out of my system, we immediately went into a Prozac regimen. And of course, I'd only taken Prozac another day or two when I completely became manic psychotic. And I had no recollection, I'll be honest with you. I had severe memory loss around the period of time that this happened. And so if I hadn't been a chronic journaler, and I journal nearly every day, I wouldn't have been aware of what was happening to me. But I obviously started hallucinating and becoming delusional. And at that point in time, I called my physician back again, and they were trying to hospitalize me. But having been a pharmaceutical rep that spent my time in the corridors of mental institutions and in psychiatric boards, there was no way in HE double toothpicks anybody was getting my ass in a mental institution. So I fought and fought and fought not to go into a mental institution because I knew from my own experience that once I got behind those closed doors, they could do anything they wanted to me. And once I got one of their major labels, then I was going to be a lifelong customer for the pharmaceutical industry, and I was well aware of that. So I went on my own alternative healing path after they had given me a total of 14 different antidepressants without a washout period, and I was a complete chemical basket case. So I wasn't able to function, I wasn't able to work, I was on disability long-term for several months before I was even able to go back into the field and call on doctors again. And at that time, I was labeled as being bipolar and told that I had a defective brain chemistry and that I would need to be on these drugs for the rest of my life. And I knew that, in fact, that this was not what was happening to me. I knew that I was having serious adverse drug reactions, and that if I didn't stop taking the chemicals that they were forcing on me, that I was going to have permanent brain damage, which in fact I have. I have permanent memory loss of several months of time around that period that I have absolutely no recollection of anything that happened. And I also have a kind of memory loss that occurs with stroke patients, in that if I'm very fatigued or if I'm extremely busy, sometimes I just can't even remember from one moment to the next. I can lose my train of thought in the middle of a sentence very easily, and I have never, ever, prior to having had these adverse reactions, had a problem with being articulate. I can talk anybody's leg off. So this was something that I just felt very adamantly about, and I started advising anyone that I knew who was on antidepressant drugs that, hey, there's something wrong with the antidepressant drugs. There's stuff about these things that they don't know about yet. You know, you may not want to be taking them. I had a very severe adverse reaction to them, but it wasn't anything that forced me to get out of the industry at that time. To be honest with you, the position was such a lucrative position that I was very hard-pressed to find anything else where I could make the kind of money that I was making and have the kind of benefits that I had. Because I had a company car, I had full insurance benefits for health and eye care and dental care and all of that, and an expense account that I could never spend all of my expense money any given expense period. So, you know, those were things that I missed quite a bit when I would try to go out and work in other areas. But I eventually knew that, you know, I was a part of the problem by even working part-time in the industry. And I left the industry in 2000 and went into natural health and healing, because that was how I had actually found my healing after my adverse reaction. And to be honest, I spend all of my time now educating people on the adverse effects of psychiatric drugs and other drugs as well, but also the initiative that Big Pharma has out there trying to label as many Americans as possible as being mentally ill, so that they can put us all on psychiatric drugs which have not been proven to be effective and are extremely dangerous and are strictly a social control mechanism. And that is what I do now for a living. Is I've written a book called Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher, and that came out in August of 2005, and I'm getting ready to revamp and relaunch this year. And I have been touring all of the United States and Canada on a child advocacy campaign, screening the movie Prescription Suicide, and lecturing to chiropractic physicians and their staff members about the adverse effects of these drugs, so that they will be able to identify patients that they see these drugs in their charts that are having adverse events, and be able to counsel them as to what to do in order to control the adverse events or to discontinue the drugs if they choose to do so.